You are about to learn the shocking truth about how people slept in the Victorian era. You would never guess the details you are about to discover. We are used to thinking of the Victorian era as a time of elegant ladies, strict gentlemen, and opulent interiors. We imagine that behind heavy velvet curtains, their lives were measured and calm, and their sleep was deep and peaceful. But what if I told you that everything you believed about Victorian nights was untrue? Behind closed bedroom doors, a completely different reality unfolded, full of strange rituals, hidden fears, and practices that would seem shocking to us today. This was especially true for women, for whom nighttime was not a time of rest, but a continuation of daytime control and oppression. Watch the video to the end to find out how an ordinary bedroom was turned into a prison, why doctors prescribed poison to women to help them sleep, and what nighttime ritual was considered normal then, but has completely disappeared from our lives today. What if I told you that everything you believed about 8 hours of sleep was a lie invented in the 20th century? For Victorians, 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep was neither the norm nor the goal. Their night's rest was divided into two parts, known as the first sleep and the second sleep. This pattern was a remnant of the pre-industrial era, when people's lives were governed not by clocks, but by the natural rhythm of the sun. When darkness fell, people went to bed for about 4 hours. Then they woke up in the middle of the night for 1 or 2 hours of wakefulness. This interval between sleep was not considered insomnia or a disorder. On the contrary, it was a productive and very personal time. People read by candlelight, prayed, wrote letters or diaries. For married couples, it was a time for intimacy, free from the worries of the day. Doctors of the time even advised couples to conceive children during this period, considering it the most favorable. However, for women, this time often meant additional responsibilities. Thus, what we treat with sleeping pills today was a completely natural part of life for Victorians. They did not fight nighttime awakenings, but used them. This lost habit shows how much our perception of rest has changed. Do you think that this kind of split sleep was more natural for humans than our modern monolithic sleep block? Share your opinion in the comments. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. Here's what happens behind the closed doors of Victorian bedrooms. The modern image of a married couple is unthinkable without a large shared bed. But for Victorians, this was far from obvious. The idea of sleeping in separate beds, or even in different bedrooms, was a sign of wealth and high social status. This fashion arose from considerations of hygiene and health. Doctors of the time claimed that one sleeping person could steal the vital energy of another. It was believed that the weaker partner would suffer from the proximity of the stronger one. There was also a belief that another person's breath at night could be harmful. The carbon dioxide exhaled by a partner was considered unhealthy and debilitating. Therefore, separate beds were seen as a precautionary measure. However, there were also social reasons behind these medical theories. Separate bedrooms allowed for distance and formality in relationships, even between spouses. This emphasized their status and conformed to the strict norms of Victorian etiquette. For women, this separation was particularly significant. On the one hand, having her own bed gave her the illusion of personal space. It was the only territory that belonged solely to her. But on the other hand, it emphasized her subordinate position. Her husband could come into her bedroom at any time, while her visits to his were strictly regulated. The door between the bedrooms was a symbol of his power and her dependence. Was this separation of bedrooms a true respect for personal space, or a subtle tool for control and maintaining distance? But even in her own bed, a woman was not safe from the main threat of the Victorian night, and that threat lurked in the very air she breathed. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of Victorian doctors, which slowly harmed women. Victorians were terrified of night air. They were convinced that it was at night that the air became filled with poisonous miasmas, harmful vapors from decaying organic matter that caused disease. This fear was so strong that it turned bedrooms into airtight chambers. Before going to bed, the windows were tightly closed and covered with heavy curtains. Any crack through which dangerous night air could penetrate was carefully sealed. Beds, especially in wealthy homes, often had massive canopies with thick curtains. At night, these curtains were drawn, creating a small, virtually airless space around the sleeper. This was believed to protect against drafts and miasmas. As a result, the bedroom became incredibly stuffy and unhealthy. Carbon dioxide levels rose and oxygen levels fell. This led to headaches, restless sleep, and a general feeling of weakness in the morning. Women who spent much more time at home than men suffered particularly badly from this. Their health, which was already considered fragile, was further undermined by this voluntary suffocation. Doctors at the time did not associate the poor health of women with the lack of fresh air. On the contrary, female weakness, paleness, and frequent fainting spells were considered signs of refinement and aristocracy. This fashion for interesting pallor actually encouraged an unhealthy lifestyle. Women were locked in stuffy rooms, which only exacerbated their problems. Paradoxically, fresh air, which could have improved their condition, was considered deadly dangerous. This phobia was so deeply ingrained in the public consciousness that even in hospitals, rooms were rarely and reluctantly ventilated. People literally preferred to suffocate rather than risk breathing in disease. It was only towards the end of the Victorian era that scientists such as Florence Nightingale began to talk about the importance of ventilation and fresh air for health. She proved that good air circulation in hospital wards dramatically reduced mortality, but it took decades for these ideas to penetrate ordinary homes. Thus, the Victorian bedroom, intended to be a refuge, actually became a trap. Fear of mythical miasmas forced people to reject the real source of health, fresh air, and for women this practice became another element of their golden cage. Are you ready for the shocking truth about what Victorians actually wore under their blankets? Victorian nightwear was far from modern notions of comfort. It was multi-layered, bulky, and reflected the strict moral standards of the time. The main element of the nighttime wardrobe was a long shirt or nightgown. It was made of cotton or linen and reached down to the feet. Its cut was very loose to hide the contours of the figure, even in sleep. Women's nightgowns were often decorated with lace, embroidery, and ribbons. This was another manifestation of status. Even in the bedroom, a woman had to look appropriate. However, this beauty often came at the expense of comfort. Many women wore a special night jacket or peignoir over their nightgowns. It was designed to keep them warm in cold, poorly heated houses. This added another layer of fabric that restricted movement. An essential part of the nighttime outfit was a cap or nightcap. It was believed to protect against the cold and drafts, which, as we remember, were considered very dangerous. Caps also helped keep hairstyles in place and protected pillows from hair grease. The beds themselves were veritable structures made up of multiple layers. Several sheets were spread on top of a mattress, often stuffed with horsehair or straw, followed by woolen blankets and a heavy quilt on top. Climbing into such a bed was quite a ritual. Can you imagine what it was like to sleep in such conditions every night, wrapped in several layers of fabric and under the weight of numerous blankets? In the next chapter, you will learn what dangerous substances women resorted to in order to fall asleep in this suffocating discomfort. When anxiety, discomfort, and the stifling atmosphere of the bedroom kept them awake, Victorian women had an easy and affordable solution. Pharmacies of the time offered a wide range of sleeping aids. The most popular of these was laudanum, an alcohol tincture of opium. Laudanum was sold without a prescription and was cheaper than alcohol. It was advertised as a universal remedy for dozens of ailments, from coughs and toothaches to insomnia and female nervous disorders. For many women, it became a constant companion. Doctors readily prescribed opiates to middle and upper-class women. It was believed that their delicate nervous systems were particularly susceptible to stress and anxiety. Instead of addressing the causes of women's discontent or depression, society offered a simple chemical solution to calm them down. Taking laudanum at night became a common ritual in many families. A few drops in a glass of water or tea guaranteed a quick sleep and oblivion from the anxieties of the day. Women became addicted to this remedy without even realizing it. The consequences of such addiction were devastating, but they were often attributed to the weakness of the female nature. Constant drowsiness, apathy, mood swings, all of these were considered symptoms of hysteria rather than the result of chronic poisoning. Husbands and doctors only increased the dose, trying to cure what they themselves had created. In addition to laudanum, there were other popular sedatives. For example, Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, which contained morphine and was advertised to calm babies, but was often used by their mothers as well. The market was flooded with dangerous drugs disguised as harmless mixtures. This availability of opiates was a form of social control. A woman under the influence of drugs was more submissive, quiet, and controllable. Her will was suppressed, and any protests were attributed to illness. She found herself in a vicious circle. Her oppressed position caused stress and insomnia, which were treated with drugs that made her even more dependent and powerless. It was a silent tragedy unfolding behind the elegant facades of Victorian houses. Thus, the bottle of laudanum on the bedside table was not just a medicine, it was a symbol of female powerlessness and despair. It was a way to silence her and make her sleep so that she would not disturb the peace of the patriarchal world. What experts on the Victorian era don't talk about is the diagnosis given to almost every other woman who complained of fatigue. If a woman's insomnia, anxiety, and general malaise did not go away with laudanum, Victorian medicine offered a radical remedy, rest cure. This method, developed by Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell, was in fact a sophisticated form of isolation and control. The patient was prescribed strict bed rest for a period of 6 to 8 weeks. She was not only forbidden to get up, but also to eat, wash, or turn over in bed on her own. All this had to be done for her by nurses. The most important element of the treatment was complete isolation from family and friends. Visits were strictly forbidden. The woman was also not allowed to read, write, sew, or do anything that might stimulate her mind. Her life was reduced to 4 things: passive lying, forced overfeeding. It was believed that hysterical women suffered from exhaustion, massage, and electrotherapy. She became completely dependent on the will of the doctor and nurses. Any display of character or disagreement was seen as a symptom of the disease. This method was intended exclusively for women. When men suffered from similar symptoms of nervous exhaustion, they were, on the contrary, prescribed active pursuits, travel, hunting, physical labor. It was believed that this would strengthen their masculine spirit. For women, however, treatment was a way to break their will and return them to their prescribed passive role. It was a demonstration that their intellectual and emotional lives had no value. Their task was to be beautiful and obedient bodies. Many women who underwent such treatment described it as torture. The famous writer Charlotte Perkins Gilman described her horrific experience in the story, The Yellow Wallpaper. She claimed that treatment by rest nearly drove her to complete insanity. What do you think was worse for a Victorian woman? Insomnia itself or the treatment offered by doctors? But even if a woman managed to avoid doctors, the very architecture and decor of her bedroom became a prison. The Victorian bedroom, especially in upper and middle-class homes, was not just a place to sleep. It was a showcase for the wealth, status, and good taste of its owners. And the person primarily responsible for this showcase was, of course, the lady of the house. The interiors were overloaded with furniture and decor, a massive carved bed made of dark wood, heavy velvet curtains, thick pile carpets, a dressing table with countless bottles and boxes. The walls were decorated with paintings, tapestries, and intricately patterned wallpaper. Every item had to speak of wealth. Even chamber pots were hidden in elegant wooden chests so as not to disturb the aesthetics. There was almost no free space left, which created a feeling of crampedness and confinement. For a woman, the bedroom was her main area of responsibility. She chose the fabrics, ordered the furniture, and kept everything clean and tidy. It was one of the few areas where she was allowed to express her creativity and management skills. However, this power was illusory. The bedroom did not belong to her, but to her husband. She was merely the keeper of his property, another beautiful item in his collection. This room, filled with her labors and cares, was also her cage. The woman spent most of her life here or in the living room adjacent to the bedroom. It was her world, but a very small and strictly limited one. All this lavish decor required constant care. Dust accumulating on countless draperies and trinkets was considered a source of disease. The daily battle with dust using rags and brushes was one of the main tasks of the maids, who were supervised by the mistress. The heavy curtains, which were supposed to protect from street light and prying eyes, also kept air and sunlight out of the room. This exacerbated the unhealthy atmosphere we have already mentioned. Beauty and status were more important than health and comfort. Thus, the bedroom was a place of paradoxes for Victorian women. It was their kingdom and their prison. It was a place of self-expression and complete submission. She created comfort and beauty, but she herself was only part of the interior. She was the guardian angel of the hearth, locked in a gilded cage, and every night she fell asleep surrounded by silent witnesses to her powerlessness. Although Victorian women took off their corsets at night, their effect on their bodies and sleep did not disappear. Years of wearing this rigid garment left an indelible mark. The discomfort earned during the day haunted them at night. The corset, worn from early adolescence, deformed the rib cage and displaced internal organs. The lungs could not expand fully, resulting in shallow breathing. This effect persisted even after the lacing was loosened. As a result, many women suffered from chronic oxygen deprivation. This manifested itself in constant fatigue, dizziness, and of course, poor sleep quality. The body simply could not fully rest and recover. Compressed digestive organs also made themselves felt. Heartburn, indigestion, and other stomach problems were frequent companions of Victorian ladies. These unpleasant sensations were exacerbated in a horizontal position and interfered with normal sleep. The back muscles, accustomed to constant support from the corset, atrophied over time. When a woman took it off, the weakened muscles could not hold the spine in the correct position. This caused back pain, which intensified at night. Thus, even freed from its daytime shackles, the woman's body could not relax. It was confined in an invisible corset of chronic pain and discomfort. For many, a good night's sleep was an unattainable luxury. This physical discomfort was compounded by psychological stress. Women complained of restless sleep and nightmares. But doctors rarely linked this to wearing a corset, considering it an absolutely necessary and safe part of women's attire. Sleep problems were again attributed to female hysteria and weak nerves. Instead of eliminating the cause, the corset, women were again offered symptomatic treatment in the form of opiates. This was yet another example of how society ignored the real suffering of women. The corset was not just an item of clothing. It was a tool for shaping the correct female body, fragile, thin, unsuited to an active life. And this tool continued its work even when it lay on a chair next to the bed. The ghost of the corset was invisibly present in the bedroom every night. It served as a reminder that a woman's body did not belong to her. It had to conform to strict standards of beauty, even if the price was her health and peaceful sleep. The ideal Victorian woman was captured in the image of the angel in the house. She was supposed to be the guardian of the hearth, the moral compass of the family, and the source of comfort. This role did not end with the onset of night. A woman's sleep was not considered her personal, inviolable time. It was conditional and could always be interrupted for the needs of the household. She had to be attentive and vigilant, ready to fulfill her duty at any moment. If her husband wanted a drink at night or felt cold, it was the wife who had to wake up and take care of him. Her comfort was secondary to that of the head of the family. She was a night nurse, always ready to come to the rescue. In homes with small children, the main burden of nighttime care fell on the mother, even if there was a nanny. It was believed that maternal instinct made her sleep more sensitive. Her rest was constantly interrupted by short intervals between feedings and comforting crying babies. The lady of the house was also responsible for overall safety. She had to sleep lightly so she could hear any suspicious noises, whether it was the footsteps of a burglar or the cough of a sick servant. She was the unofficial night watchman. In the morning, she had to get up before everyone else. She had to make sure the servants woke up, give orders in the kitchen, and ensure that by the time her husband woke up, the house was running like clockwork. There was no time for her to wake up slowly herself. This constant state of half-sleep led to chronic sleep deprivation and exhaustion. But complaining about fatigue was considered bad form. The angel of the house had to be tireless and always maintain a cheerful and pleasant appearance. Her insomnia and fatigue were invisible to society. They were part of her sacrificial role, proof of her love and devotion to her family. Her personal needs for rest and recovery were simply not taken into account. Thus, even at night, a woman did not belong to herself. Her sleep was not a right, but a privilege that could be taken away at any moment. She fell asleep with a sense of responsibility and woke up with a burden of duties. The bed was not so much a place of rest for her as another post where she carried out her endless service. Her role as the guardian of the hearth had no breaks or days off, and the price of this angelic status was high: her own health and peace of mind. Night in the Victorian era was not only a time of physical danger, but also a space of moral panic. Darkness was associated with sin, chaos, and loss of control. And at the center of these fears was often female virtue. It was believed that women were inherently weak and susceptible to temptation. Night, with its freedom from daytime supervision, posed a particular threat to them. Therefore, a woman's bedroom had to be her fortress and at the same time, her prison. Bedroom windows, especially on the first floor, were often covered not only with curtains, but also with shutters or even bars. This was done to protect against burglars, but also to shield women from the outside world and its temptations. Their isolation was considered a guarantee of their safety and honor. Even inside the house, women's movements at night could be restricted. In some strict families, it was considered improper for a young girl to leave her room after lights out. Any exit into the dark corridor could be misinterpreted. The fear of the dark was very real. Not all homes had gas lighting, and candles and oil lamps gave off a dim light and carried the risk of fire. Moving around the house at night was difficult and required caution. For women, this fear was exacerbated by their helplessness. In case of danger, they had to call a man for help. They were assigned the passive role of victims who needed to be protected. This instilled helplessness also affected sleep. Many women suffered from night terrors and nightmares. They feared not only real burglars, but also imaginary ghosts and supernatural forces, which were believed to be active at night. Victorian literature is full of Gothic stories about mysterious events that take place in old houses at night. These stories form the cultural background, reinforcing the general atmosphere of anxiety. Night was a time when the secret became apparent and evil was set free. In this atmosphere, the bedroom became the last line of defense. A woman locked in her room was a symbol of order and civilization, standing against the chaos of the night. But this symbolic role only emphasized her actual confinement. Thus, the Victorian night was imbued not only with fear of disease, but also with deep moral anxiety. For women, this meant even greater control and even less freedom. Her sleep was guarded as carefully as her virtue, and often these concepts were inseparable. We have lifted the veil on the world of Victorian bedrooms and seen that behind the outward prosperity lay a complex and often grim reality. Separate sleeping arrangements, fear of fresh air, uncomfortable clothing, and dangerous sleeping pills were all part of the nighttime life of people of that era. But for women, the night became a mirror of their daytime disenfranchisement. The bedroom, which was supposed to be a place of rest and privacy, became yet another stage for demonstrating social status, medical control, and family responsibilities. Women were expected to be perfect housewives, submissive wives, and vigilant mothers even in their sleep. Their right to proper rest was almost completely ignored. The history of Victorian sleep is not just a collection of strange facts. It is a reminder of how deeply social norms and gender roles can penetrate the most intimate spheres of our lives, affecting our health and well-being. It is a story of how women's bodies and minds became a battleground for control. Suggest topics related to hidden aspects of life in the past that you would like to see in future videos in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new research into the mysteries of history.